Hi, listeners. If you're enjoying Criminology, then we have a podcast recommendation to share that we think you'll love. It's a true crime show called America's Most Infamous Crimes, hosted by Katie Ring, a woman's self-defense advocate. Each week, Katie takes on one of the most notorious crimes in American history, from serial killers like Ted Bundy, who terrorized entire cities, to high-profile kidnappings like the Elizabeth Smart case, to headline-making investigations like the Idaho College murders. Every case is told victim first, with the kind of depth that goes beyond the headlines. Each one unfolds across multiple episodes, released every Tuesday through Thursday, from the first sign something was wrong to the moment the truth came out, or didn't. We have a clip from her episode diving into the full Ted Bundy story. If you like what you hear and want to hear the rest, make sure to follow America's Most Infamous Crimes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts. There's also a link to the show in this episode's description.
From the moment Ted Bundy was born, he was surrounded by lies. Ted's mom, Louise, got pregnant in early 1946, but his dad abandoned them, which meant Ted was born out of wedlock that November. This was a huge scandal that could have destroyed their family. To avoid the stigma that came with being a young single mother, Ted's grandparents raised him as their own son in Philadelphia. He actually spent his early life thinking Louise was his older sister and not his mother. In interviews, Ted claims that his upbringing was completely normal. But according to some family members and biographers, Ted's grandfather, Samuel, was known to have a violent temper, was racist and misogynistic, and would even harm animals. And despite Bundy's claims, it seemed like whatever was going on in that household did have an effect on him psychologically. One night in 1950, when Ted was just 3 years old, his teenage aunt Julia recalled waking up and seeing him standing next to her bed. But he wasn't there because he couldn't sleep or to ask for a glass of water. As Julia squinted in the darkness, she saw Ted with a huge smile on his face, and then realized she was surrounded by butcher knives. Of course, I'm not a psychologist, but this is not something that a 3-year-old generally thinks to do on their own. They learn by copying behaviors they've seen. So to me, this would indicate that something very wrong was going on in that house. Luckily, Ted didn't try and hurt Julia that night. But even with these signs that something was clearly wrong, his family didn't get him any help. In fact, things only got less stable for him over time. In 1951, when Ted was just 4, he and Louise, who was still pretending to be his sister, left Philadelphia and moved to Washington State. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but it was a confusing adjustment for Ted. Remember, he still thought his grandparents were his biological parents. To him, it seemed like his older sister was separating him from his mom and dad. This was just another moment of perceived betrayal that he'd remember for the rest of his life. And things only got more confusing from there. Shortly after moving, Louise met a guy named Johnny Bundy at church, but it wasn't long before things got serious. They got married after just a few months of dating, and Johnny even adopted Ted. But Ted never really accepted Johnny as his father. He thought he was unintelligent and resented him for not being able to provide him with the expensive clothes and items that he wanted. Friends even recall Ted provoking Johnny, and Johnny sometimes responding with violence. They looked like a happy family on the outside, but Ted was just as miserable as he'd been in Philly. And things only got worse when Ted found his birth certificate one day. That's when he learned the truth, that his birth father had abandoned him, and his older sister was actually his mom. As you'd expect, it turned his world upside down. Ted became consumed by his bitterness. He felt rejected and insecure, and as a teenager, he developed a reputation for being kind of a loner. His attitude was strange to his classmates because on the surface, Ted seemed to have it all. He was smart, good-looking, and well-spoken. A lot of the girls at his high school wondered why he'd never went on dates. That's the thing about insecurity, though. It isn't always rational. Despite everything he had going for him, Ted never felt like he fit in, especially around young women. He was interested in girls, but Ted wasn't able to express those desires in a healthy way. He was more comfortable being on the outside looking in. Somewhere he was in control. So instead of letting himself be vulnerable, he started sneaking out at night to take walks around his neighborhood, stalking women and peeping on them as they got dressed. He'd fantasize about dominating these women and controlling them. He graduated high school in 1965 when he was 18 with average grades and moved on to the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. A lot of young people treat college as a fresh start, a way to reinvent themselves, but not Ted. He felt lonely and aimless. He couldn't decide on a major and had trouble making friends. Ted thought that getting a girlfriend would solve a lot of issues, both in terms of his identity crisis and his urge to peep on women. He decided that if he was going to really make a major change in his life, he had to push himself further out of his comfort zone. So in 1966, when Ted was 20, he transferred to the University of Washington in Seattle. But instead of fixing his problems, it only made them worse. After Ted Bundy transferred to the University of Washington, it seemed like the move to Seattle was a fresh start. He decided to study Chinese, thinking he could work in the State Department someday as a liaison to East Asia. It might seem like kind of a random choice, but with Ted, everything was calculated. In his mind, working for the government was the kind of position that would give him the authority and control he wanted so badly. The change of scenery also helped Ted get something else he wanted, a girlfriend. It wasn't long before he hit it off with a classmate named Diane Edwards, a beautiful, driven young woman from a wealthy California family. When they started dating, it seemed like Ted finally found everything he wanted. But the problem was he didn't feel like he was good enough for Diane. She expected a lot from a boyfriend, and he tried to live up to those expectations by dressing better and improving his conversational skills, but he couldn't handle the pressure. Sometime in 1967, when Ted was 20 or 21, he was starting to question everything, including his career goals. His grades took a nosedive, and he was still overcome with unhealthy sexual desires. Ted thought that having a loving girlfriend would stop him from fantasizing about violence. But now he was afraid that those thoughts would never truly go away. Things only got worse when Diane dumped Ted after about a year of dating. The breakup confirmed his worst insecurities, and instead of proving them wrong, he gave in to them. The next year, in 1968, Ted dropped out of college. He spent the next few months traveling aimlessly around the country, not doing much of anything. But Ted hadn't completely given up on making something of himself. So when an old friend suggested getting involved in politics, he gave it a chance. Just like his dream of working for the State Department, being in politics would give Ted some of the authority and control he was so desperate for by giving him something to be in charge of. He started out by volunteering for Arthur Fletcher's campaign for Lieutenant Governor of Washington. Fletcher didn't win, but Ted loved the experience anyways. It gave him the sense of purpose he'd been missing ever since his breakup with Diane. So he decided to give a career in politics a real shot. In 1969, when Ted was 22, he enrolled at Temple University in Philadelphia to pursue a degree in urban planning. But even with his renewed sense of purpose, he still struggled with the darkness inside of him. He went back to his old habit of peeping, wearing a fake mustache and a wig while he stalked the campus at night. By this point, his sexual fantasies had become even more disturbing. Now, he wasn't just thinking about abducting the women he stalked. He wanted to sexually abuse them and kill them too. And at some point during his first semester in Philadelphia, Ted decided to give in to those desires.
Thank you for listening. To hear the rest of the story, follow America's Most Infamous Crimes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.